For 20 years, one man opened America's day. He sat behind the Today Show desk with coffee mug in hand, a joke on his lips, and the trust of millions riding on every word he said. Networks pay for talent, but they pay even more for the illusion of decency. Matt Lauer sold that illusion better than almost anyone in television history, right up until the morning it collapsed in under 24 hours. On November 29th, 2017, NBC News fired him without warning, without severance, and without a farewell segment. Within days, a picture emerged that had nothing to do with the affable dad who signed autographs at Rockefeller Plaza. It was a picture of a powerful man who, according to numerous former colleagues, treated his workplace like his own private domain. Today, we're tracing how a college dropout from Ohio built one of the most valuable brands of morning television, how it all came apart in a single week, and what his life actually looks like now. Matthew Todd Lauer was born on December 30th, 1957, in New York City. According to Britannica's biography of him, his path into television started far from any newsroom, with an internship he took at just 21 years old. His father, known as Jay, was a bicycle company executive with Romanian Jewish roots, and his mother, Marilyn, had worked as a model before running her own boutique. Lauer grew up bouncing between his father's practical, work-first mentality and his mother's world of image and presentation, a combination that, whether by nature or circumstance, mapped almost perfectly onto the job he would eventually hold. Morning television is equal parts substance and performance, and Lauer had been unknowingly training for both his entire childhood. He enrolled at Ohio University to study communications, but television pulled at him before graduation could. In 1979, for credit short his degree, he walked away from Ohio University to take a production job at WWK in Huntington, West Virginia. It's a detail that would follow him for decades, in headlines and in his own retelling. The anchorman who never actually finished college. He wouldn't complete that degree until 1997, when he was already a national figure, writing a paper on how his career related to his coursework instead of returning to a lecture hall. Ohio University later gave him its Medal of Merit for that unusual, drawn-out academic finish. Lauer's early career reads like a resume built for stamina rather than glamour. Through the early 1980s, he moved through local newsrooms, eventually co-hosting the lifestyle news magazine PM Magazine in 3 separate cities, Richmond, Providence, and finally New York. That kind of market hopping was unusual, and it forced him to constantly recalibrate his on-air persona for new audiences, a skill that would matter enormously once he was speaking to the entire country every morning. By the late 1980s, he'd landed a national gig, co-hosting the ABC entertainment show Fame, Fortune, and Romance alongside Robin Leach. The show didn't last, but it put his face in front of a nationwide audience for the first time. What followed was a genuinely brutal stretch of overlapping jobs, local anchoring in Philadelphia and Boston, while also contributing sports coverage to ESPN and entertainment reporting for HBO. He was, by most accounts, everywhere at once, and it built him a reputation inside the industry as someone who simply didn't turn down work. A short, combustible run hosting the New York talk show 9 Broadcast Plaza in the early 1990s nearly ended his career before it began. The program leaned into the shock television trend of the era, and Lauer reportedly didn't want to go along with it. He left, and, as television history would have it, Howard Stern briefly filled the same chair before the format was retooled into the tabloid-style Richard Bay show. By his own later accounts, Lauer was nearly broke by 1992, with no steady job. That's the state he was in when WNBC hired him to co-anchor a local morning broadcast, a modest gig that turned out to be the on-ramp to everything that followed. Once inside NBC's orbit, Lauer became the network's utility player, filling in wherever a familiar face was needed. Weekend Today, NBC News at sunrise, even NBC Nightly News during Tom Brokaw's absences. According to NBC's own account of his history, cited by NPR at the time of his firing, Lauer joined Today as news anchor in 1994 and was elevated to co-anchor in 1997. Wikipedia's summary of his career similarly places him at NBC's Today desk from 1994 as a news anchor before he moved into the co-host chair 3 years later, taking over the role that had belonged to Brian Gumbel. The transition wasn't purely smooth. Gumbel had run the show with a firm hand, and reports at the time described friction as leadership shifted. But Lauer's chemistry with co-host Katie Couric became one of the defining dynamics of the show, an easy, teasing rapport that turned today into something closer to a daily ritual than a newscast. NBC leaned into that warmth, and it worked. The show climbed back toward the top of the morning ratings race, overtaking rival Good Morning America for years at a stretch. Lauer wasn't just a lightweight presence, either. He anchored coverage of major breaking news. The 1995 Oklahoma City bombing among the events NBC entrusted him early on, and spent 2 decades as a contributing anchor on Dateline NBC, giving him a foothold in serious, long-form journalism that few morning hosts ever get. He interviewed sitting presidents and foreign royals, hosted Olympic coverage, and became a fixture of NBC's Thanksgiving Day parade broadcasts. By any conventional measure, he had built one of the most durable brands in American broadcasting, reportedly earning around $25 million a year by the early 2010s, under a contract renewal reported by Forbes and referenced in Wikipedia's account of his tenure. Lauer's personal life moved at the same accelerated pace as his career. He met Dutch model Annette Roque, known professionally as Jade, in 1997, and they married the following year in Bridgehampton, New York. The couple had 3 children: Jack, born in 2001, Romy, born in 2003, and Tejas, born in 2006. Multiple outlets, including Celebrity Network's profile of Lauer, note that the marriage briefly cracked during Roque's 3rd pregnancy in 2006, when she filed for divorce, citing the strain of his career and public life, only to withdraw the filing weeks later. The couple stayed together for another decade before Lauer's firing became the pressure the marriage couldn't survive. Roque filed again, and the divorce was finalized on September 7, 2019, according to reporting from People and other outlets at the time. Under the settlement, Lauer agreed to pay Roque roughly $20 million and transferred ownership of the family's Water Mill horse property, known as Brightside Farm, which he continues to run. The scandal that ended Lauer's career had its roots in the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, though the public wouldn't learn that for years. NBC producer Brooke Neville's later told the network that Lauer had assaulted her in his hotel room during the games. Her account first became public through journalist Ronan Farrow's 2019 book Catch and Kill, and, as reported more recently, Neville's has since given her own extended account of the incident in a 2026 memoir titled Unspeakable Things. Lauer has consistently denied that any encounter with Neville's was non-consensual, describing it in a public letter as an affair rather than assault, though he acknowledged the relationship itself was inappropriate given his position. Whatever the full truth of that specific encounter, NBC's response was swift once a formal complaint reached the company. According to NBC News chairman Andrew Lack's memo at the time, cited by NPR, the network received a detailed complaint from a colleague about inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace on the evening of Monday, November 27, 2017. Fewer than 48 hours later, on the morning of Wednesday, November 29th, Lauer was fired. His longtime co-hosts, Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb, learned the news only shortly before they had to announce it live on air, a moment of visible shock that became its own piece of television history. Lack's memo added a line that would prove significant. NBC had reason to believe this may not have been an isolated incident. That line turned out to be an understatement. Hours after the firing was announced, Variety published the results of a 2-month investigation into Lauer's conduct, built on interviews with dozens of current and former NBC staffers. According to Variety's reporting, 3 women described being sexually harassed by Lauer, and their accounts were corroborated by people they had confided in at the time. The article described an office at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, equipped with a button that let Lauer lock his door from his desk without standing up. A detailed Variety sources said gave him privacy to make advances on staffers. The New York Times separately reported that a former employee described being assaulted in that office in 2001. Lauer has since disputed the specific claim that the button could lock the door, calling it inaccurate in a later public statement. Though NBC insiders told outlets, including Fox News and the Washington Post, that similar door-closing mechanisms existed elsewhere in the building and weren't unique to his office. Variety's report also described Lauer giving a colleague a sex toy along with an explicit note, and exposing himself to another employee who declined to engage with him. In the days that followed, additional women came forward, including former Today production assistant Addie Zinon, who said publicly that Lauer used his seniority to pressure her into a relationship early in her career. Former co-host and Curry, whose own exit from Today in 2012 had long been the subject of speculation, later said she wasn't surprised by the allegations and indicated she had raised concerns about Lauer's conduct with NBC executives years earlier. NBC has maintained that no complaint reached its current management before the one that triggered Lauer's firing, but the company also announced policy changes in the aftermath, including making the concealment of misconduct complaints a fireable offense. Lauer himself was not paid out on the remainder of his contract. NBC classified the termination as for cause. The fall was immediate and, by most accounts, total. Lauer largely disappeared from public view, retreating to Strongheart Manor, the waterfront North Haven estate he and Roque had purchased from actor Richard Gere in 2016 for roughly $36.5 million, according to property records reviewed by outlets covering Hampton's real estate. He put the estate on the market not long after the scandal broke, first listing it in 2019 for around $44 million. It sat unsold for years, cycling through price cuts, before finally selling in 2022 for $40.9 million, a modest profit on paper, but a steep discount from his original ask. He held on to other property, including a smaller estate nearby in Sag Harbor and, notably, a roughly 16,000-acre ranch in New Zealand that he and Roque had bought in 2017. That ranch drew its own controversy. New Zealand's Overseas Investment Office reportedly reviewed the purchase given his changed public standing, and the property later faced separate scrutiny over animal welfare complaints, according to coverage of his real estate holdings. Ronan Farrow's Catch and Kill, published in October 2019, reopened the story just as a divorce was being finalized, detailing Neville's account of the Sochi encounter and painting a broader picture of a network culture that Farrow argued had shielded powerful men from consequences for years. Lauer responded with a lengthy open letter in 2019, disputing the characterization of the encounter as assault, criticizing what he described as one-sided reporting and acknowledging, without specifying which allegations he meant, that he had made mistakes that caused real pain to people around him. Financially, Lauer remains extremely well off. Estimates from Celebrity Net Worth and other outlets that track his finances place his current net worth at around $80 million, down from a peak that some estimates put above $120 to $150 million before the scandal and divorce. He earned more than $100 million from NBC over the course of his contract history, according to those same estimates. And while the divorce settlement and years of unsold real estate dented that fortune, he has not needed to return to television to sustain his lifestyle. By most public accounts, Lauer's daily life now centers on his 3 children, golf, and a relationship with Shaman Abbas, a longtime friend and fashion industry executive he began dating in 2019. Reports describing his routine, including profiles published by outlets covering Hampton's social life, depict a deliberately quiet existence split between New York's East End and New Zealand, largely removed from the industry that made him famous. He has made no attempt at a television comeback, and none of the major networks have shown any indication of offering him one. In an industry that forgives a great deal over enough time, Lauer's case has remained something of an exception, a testament, depending on who you ask, either the severity of what he was accused of or to how thoroughly the public's view of him curdled in that single November week. What's clear is that the man who spent 2 decades convincing the country he could be trusted with its morning spent the years since largely out of its sight, wealthy, private, and by all appearances aware that no amount of money buys back a reputation once it's gone.